So in the last one, we added our assignment list and detail views to this project. And so if you'd like to follow along in this tutorial, you can just go to GitHub to our repositories, and you can go to the Teach Me Django repository. And then you can just navigate to the commits to see which commit you'd like to navigate to. So currently we're on this third commit, which is the assignment list and detail views added. And so you can just clone this repository and navigate back to those commits. And so once you have everything cloned, what we're going to do in this tutorial is basically just add the form to create the assignments and also handle the graded assignments. So we're going to try and tackle both of those in this video. So once you've got everything up and running, then let's get started. So we have the front end and the back end servers running, and we can check this here in our boilerplate. And so this is what the assignment looks like. You can just select the answers, and when you click done, then it gives you this processing complete, which is basically just a message that displays when you click the done button. So you see you get message.success. And so what we'll want to do is handle the creating of a graded assignment when a user is finished answering all the questions. So basically we'll submit the user's answers to each question, and then on the server we'll evaluate whether the answer they selected was the correct answer, and then create a graded assignment object which will hold the grade of that user's assignment. So we'll get to that in a second, but what we actually want to do first is handle the form that will allow us to create assignments, and this will only be allowed for users that are teachers, so they have the isTeacher property being true. And so we're just going to come back in here, and we can actually close off a lot of this over here. And we're going to go inside the containers and create the assignment create.js. And we'll just copy that name there. And let's just import React from React. And what we want is actually a form that will allow us to add more fields to it. So here in &d, we can just go to the form, and if you scroll down, then we're looking for this one here, which shows that you can add a field and you can also remove those fields. So we'll just copy all of that code, and we'll come back in here, and it's actually quite a long one, and I'm actually going to remove the comments as well, and I'm going to remove these form item layout objects and the labels as well. We're not too interested in that. And so let's just take a look at what this looks like. We also don't need the React DOM render, and we'll say export default, and let's call this the wrapped assignment create, and export that as the default, and then just make this the assignment create like that. And then we'll come into our root, and we're going to import it. So we'll say import assignment create from containers/assignment create. And we want to create a new path here, which will be when we go to /create. And this will be the assignment create component that will handle it. And let's see what errors we get. So we get that form item layout problem, and we can just sort that out. So we can just get rid of that there, and all of the form item layout with label. Cool, so let's check it out now. And let's go to /create, and we get this form, and we can add fields and remove them as well. And so let's add a link here in the breadcrumbs of our layout so that we can navigate there. So inside the layout component, we can go to the breadcrumbs, and we'll add another one here. And we already have the user ID in the state, and let's actually add the token. So this will be state.auth.token, and we're also going to add isTeacher, which will come from state.auth.isTeacher. And then with the breadcrumbs, what we want to do is actually, we don't want to display this link if we aren't authenticated. So we'll add a check here and say if this .props.token is not null, then we will show that link. Otherwise, just return null. And actually we can put that outside the breadcrumb. And then the same kind of concept for the next one. So we'll just copy this entire thing here. And we're saying if the token is not null and this.props.isTeacher is not false. Or in other words, we could say and this.props.isTeacher, so meaning it is true, then we will return a link that takes us to /create. And we can actually output that like this. And we'll say this is create. And there we go. Now let's come back. And if we refresh this and we see a little area here, let's get rid of that there. We have to say and this.props.isTeacher. And we get profile showing in brackets. So let's get rid of those brackets there. And there we go. Okay, so let's go into the admin here. And we're going to go change this mat user to be a teacher. So we'll just select that to be true, save and continue, come back here, refresh it, and we'll actually need to log out and log in, and there we go, and we're just getting those brackets again. So let's remove those, and there we go. And if I click on create, then it takes us to that form there. And so let's go back in here, and we can close the layout and the roots. And what we're going to do in the assignment create is we're going to manage the questions themselves. So here, how we're adding a field, this is like going to be adding a question, and we're going to manage those questions here on this component, and we're going to create another container which will be the question form. So basically we're creating like a form set, and what we'll do is we'll just render the question form over and over depending on how many questions we want to add, and we'll again manage the number of questions here inside the assignment create. And then the question form will actually be very similar to what we have here. We can actually pretty much copy everything in this file and paste it in the question form, and then we'll just rename everything here. So this will be wrapped question form. And in fact, actually we're not even going to create a form using &d, because what we're going to do is rather create form items and then pass those form items inside the general form that we have here. So inside this form. And so instead we can get rid of that call there, and we'll just call this the question form, and then this is the class question form. And so everything here is pretty much going to remain the same. We can actually make this a little bit shorter. And so each question form will manage the keys of that form, whereas the handle submit we're not going to handle on the question form. That will rather be on the assignment create view, so we can get rid of that. And now we have the render method, and so the label of this form item will not be the passengers, but instead this will be the choices. So inside the question form we'll manage the choices of each question, and in the assignment create form, if we just scroll up, passengers will rather be question. And so let's actually go into the assignment create and think about the form items that we want to have inside the main form. So we're going to have this button which will allow us to add a question. So let's rather make this add question, and this will be the submit button, but instead of making this a dashed, we'll make this type secondary, and we'll actually get rid of the with style. And if we take a look at this, now you've got add question and submit there. And what we also want is a field to pass in the title of the assignment. So we'll just create another form item here, and we'll set the label of this form item equal to something like title, like that. And then we're going to need to use the get field decorator like this one, so that we can actually give it a name which we'll access it by. So we just paste everything in there, and we'll keep all of those rules there except for white space. And the message here we can just say is please input a title, and then inside here these braces where we actually pass the component to input is going to be an input, which we already have over there, and we can take a look at this one as an example. So we'll just bring that inside there, and this input will have a placeholder of add a title, and we can get rid of the styling as well. And so now if we take a look, we see K is not defined, and that's the get field decorator name. So we're going to change that to be title. And if we come back here, now you've got the add a title field and add a question, and we'll also add an H1 above here, and then they will just say create an assignment. And then these form items, which we're basically mapping through the keys, what we're going to do here is rather just store a count of the number of question forms and then create a question form to pass in based on the number of counts. So actually this constant form items will just change to questions, and initially this is actually going to be an empty list, and we can get rid of everything right here inside this method. So everything up till there. We can get rid of the keys, we can get rid of this get field decorator there, and we can get rid of that because we're not using it. And then let's just go up here. We have the handle submit, which will keep as this for now. We've got the add method, and instead of using this get field value of keys, which doesn't exist anymore, we can basically just get rid of all of that. We've got the state that we need to define up here, so we'll say state equals to this object here, which has a form count, and we'll say the form count initially is 1, and we can also remove the ID from up top there. And then everything here in the remove, we can also get rid of that, and we'll just make this an anonymous function as well. So inside the add method, what we want to do is grab the form count from the state and then set the state to just be that form count plus 1. So basically you're literally just adding 1 to the form count. So we'll say constant form count equals to this dot state, and then we'll say this dot set state and pass in the form count to be form count plus 1. And then the same kind of thing here in the remove method, where this will just now be -1. So this is a very basic way of doing it. Maybe you won't be removing the exact question that you wanted to remove, but for the time being it's good enough. And then we can just come down here, and what we want to do is loop through the form count in the state and create ourselves a question form based on the number in the form count. So we'll say for let I equals 0, and where I is smaller than this dot state dot form count, and then just say I plus equals 1. Then here we will push a component into the questions array and then render those questions here like this. And so what we want to push inside here is going to be the question form. So let's actually make sure we've imported that. So we'll say import question form from question form, and then over here we will just push that inside like that. And so let's take a look. We see we've got get field decorator of undefined inside question form, and that's because we took away the method here to create an empty form. So what we want to do is pass in the props of this component, which is being created using the empty form, inside our question form so that it inherits those props. So we'll just say pass in this dot props. Now if we come back, cool, now we can see it's kind of taking shape, except we've got a submit button there. So let's come down here and remove this form item, and that's starting to look a little bit better. But now we're getting this, each child in the array should have a unique key property. And so if we come back in here to the assignment create, we could say that the key equals to I. And if we come back, now we're just getting a nesting problem, which is basically that we can't return a form itself. So we're going to need to remove the form there. And these form items, we're basically going to need to wrap this inside a higher order component. So let's say import HOC from HOC. And then we'll take this and just wrap it around everything we have here. And so we've got add a field here. So let's make this add an answer choice. And what we also need to do is specify the actual answer itself. So we're going to need to create another form item above it so that the user can specify what the answer is. And again, you could get creative and maybe add like a checkbox next to each answer choice, which if you selected that one would make it the answer. But just to get this thing to work, let's just copy some of the stuff we have here. So we'll just make another form item, and then we'll need the get field decorator as well. So let's just copy that. And if we just save that, so you can see the get field decorator has the strange syntax of names of k. And basically what that's doing is allowing each form item to have a unique name that you can grab its value from. And so we'll need to play around with that to get this to work. So for the time being, let's just add a label here and make this answer. And we'll say, please input an answer to this question. And if we come back here, we've got k is undefined, and that's basically this problem here. So for the time being, let's just put in answers. And if we come back, we've got a cannot read property props of undefined. And that's because of the answers that we have here. Now, basically what we need to do is ensure that every question form has a unique get field decorator, not only within the form, but compared to other question forms. Because let's say we render out 5 question forms that all have a get field decorator of answers. Then it's basically going to set the value of each field in those 5 questions to be the same thing, because it's got the same get field decorator property. So basically what we need to do is pass in the question ID from the assignment create component here, and using that question ID, we can then differentiate each question form from the next one. So basically here we'll use that same syntax that they did, where you basically pass in like a square bracket to access the index to access an element by its index, and we'll just say this.props.id is what's being passed in. And so then we can come here in the assignment create, and we'll set ID equal to I, because I is just one way of incrementing through it. And so if we refresh this, we're still getting that error. And so let's go back into the question form, and we can also remove white space from there. And we also need to pass in the actual form component in here, which is actually going to be an input. So we can just grab this one here and put that in there as well. And this is going to be the actual answer to the question. Well, in this case, the choices basically. So we'll have here the placeholder as what is the answer, and we'll remove the style. And let's come back and see. And there we go. Now it's working, and we've got add a title. We've got what is the answer. We can add an answer choice, and we're still getting those passengers coming through, and that's just coming from inside here. And so we're going to need to kind of do the same thing with the get field decorator of the choices. So this is going to be choices here, and we'll set the get field decorator to be choices of this.props.id, and we'll say please input a choice to the question, and then the placeholder here will be the answer choice, and then we can get rid of the style there. So let's just take a look at what we've got here. We've got one form item, which is the choices, and that's being looped through based on the keys count, which is what we had by default from AND-D. And we're using the ID of each question to differentiate the choices of each form. And we can get rid of that required false there. We don't need that. And each choice that's being looped through has its own input, which says answer choice. And if the key length is greater than 1, then it's going to show the icon, which will allow you to remove that answer choice. Then we're returning a bunch of form items. The first one is going to be the actual answer to the question. So it's going to say, what is the answer? So you input what the actual answer is. Then it's going to give you the choices to input, and then a button to add another answer. So if we take a look at that, you've got the title, the answer, add an answer choice, and add a question. Now what we need is a field that says, what is the question? And so if we come back in here, where that can go is actually just right here above the answer form item. So we'll just copy that, paste it there, and this will be question. And then this here the getField decorator we're going to use as question to differentiate, and call this.props.id, and we'll say please input a question, and then here this will be add a question. And if we save that and check it out, now you've got one form showing which asks you for a question, the answer to the question, and then the choices as answers to that question. And if we add a question, you can see that the exact same form was repeated. You've got add a question, what is the answer, and the answer choice, and you can add an answer choice to each one. And so to kind of help differentiate the forms from each other, we'll just add a divide between them. So let's go back to the answer create, and we'll wrap this around with an HOC, which we'll actually need to import. So we'll say import HOC from HOC, and then here we will wrap this around like that, and then we'll pass in a divide, and a divider basically comes from and D, which is another one of their components, and then we can just simply just add it like this. And so now we need to pass the key inside the higher order component, and if we check this out, you can just refresh this. Now you've got that divide there, and if I add a question, then at least that divide is kind of separating them. You could make that thicker as well. And so we'll also add a little icon next to the question to remove that question. So just like how they do here, where they say if keys.length is greater than 1, then return an icon like this, and we'll grab that there, come here, and here where they're pushing each high order component, we're adding a question form and a divider. And so I'll just put it right there, and we'll say if questions dot length is greater than 1, then return an icon, and where disabled is where questions dot length equals 1, and on click we'll just say this dot remove, like that. So let's see what this looks like. And if we add a question, then we're seeing no icon yet, so let's go back here and say if it's greater than 0, and disabled is if it's equal to 0. And if I click add question, then there's the little icon to remove that question. And let's actually try and add it above the question form and see what this looks like. So if I add a question, then there's a little icon, and if you press it, then it removes the question. Cool. So let's actually add that question, and let's just pass in a title and just say test. We basically just want to see what the data looks like when we submit it, and we'll say this is question 1, we'll say this is answer 1, we'll add an answer choice and make that answer 2, and the question here will be question 2, the answer will just be answer 2, and just some choices, and we can make that one. And okay, so we're seeing that this is giving us the same answer inside the choices. So let's go back here to the question form. And so the problem is basically happening here inside this getField decorator. We're calling choices of this.props.id, but this should actually rather be choices of k like it was. And outside here, we're going to pass in questions of this.props.id. And so now if we check this out, and we'll add an answer choice there, then you can see that those values are now different. They're unique. So let's fill in the rest of the form. If we click submit, we've got received values. We've got answers are A and B. The keys are 1 and 3 because we deleted one of those keys. We've got a question, which is question 1 and question 2, where those are the names of the questions we have here. And then we have the questions arrays, which are the arrays of choices to each question. So we've got empty, and then A and basically Bieber, and then you've got the second one here, B and that. So that's how the data is coming through. And okay, yes, we also have the title there. So we want to basically take that data, format it a little bit, and send that through to the backend, where the server will basically create the form. And so let's go and add the functionality inside the submit method here. So here you've got handle submit. And so basically the format of how we want to submit this is going to be an assignment object. So we'll say the assignment equals to an object, and it's going to have a teacher, right? Because we know when we create an assignment, it has to have a teacher. and it has to have a title. So those are two easy properties. The title just simply comes from values.title, and then the teacher is going to be this.props.username, and we should have that at the bottom here. So we'll just go and copy that from the assignment detail. So let's just grab everything there and paste that. So we need the username, which is going to be state.auth.username, and we'll pass in the wrapped assignment create inside that connect method there. Just save that, and we're going to need to import connect from React Redux, and then we'll also add the actions in the store to handle creating the assignment. So we'll get to that in a second, but let's just get this object sorted in our handle submit. So we've got the teacher and we've got the title, but we also want to pass in the questions for that assignment. And I think the easiest is just to simply add in questions like that. And this questions key is going to be a list of question objects. And each question object has to have a title, it has to have the choices, and it has to have the answer. So basically, we're going to loop through the props in our form and push each question that we'll create as an object into a list of questions, which will then be passed here into the assignment object. So we'll start with the questions, which is going to be an empty list. And then we'll say for let I equal to 0, where I is smaller than the values.questions.length. So basically the length of questions. And then we'll say I plus equals 1. And every time we loop through, we're going to say push, and we're going to push an object inside there where each question has a title. It's going to have the choices, and it's going to have the answer. And so the title is simply just going to be the value inside the list of the questions. So this is just going to be values.questions of I. And actually, for the time being, let's just comment all of that out. And this is meant to be a colon there. So let's just go down and comment out the get assignment detail. And I'll just add some dummy data here. Here you've got the question, which is a list of question titles. And then you've got the questions, which is a list of the choices to that question. So basically what we need to do is make sure that we don't pass in the empty values in those arrays. You can see you have empty and then answer and incorrect. You want to get rid of those empty values. So what we're going to do is, let's just go back up here. We're going to set the choices to be values.questions. And actually this first one should be question of I, because question has an array of question titles that we're asking, whereas questions has a list of objects that have choices inside them. So we're going to say questions of I to grab each instance from that list, and then we say dot choices to access the choices of that object, and then we need to filter that where we don't want any null values. So basically we're just saying where element is not equal to null, and then the answer is just going to be values dot answers of I, and we just need to put a comma at the end of that. Cool, so now we've pushed the object into the questions array, and we've passed those questions into the assignment, and now we just need to create the actions in the store to handle the logic of pushing that to the server. So let's go and do that now. We'll go into the store here, into assignments, and all the way at the bottom here we're going to need to actually just basically copy all of this again and change this to be the assignment create logic. So this will just call create assignment start, and then this one will be create assignment success and create assignment detail, or create assignment fail rather, and then this one will be just create assignment. When we create the assignment, we're going to take in a token to authorize the user, and then we're going to pass in the actual assignment when it's created. So here in the assignment create, this object will pass into this method, and we'll dispatch get, or rather create assignment start, and then here we don't need to console that out. We can just say dispatch create assignment success and create assignment fail. And we're going to need to change this to be a post request, where we'll post it just to this URL because it does handle post requests. And we're not going to get anything back from the response. We're just going to basically just dispatch the create assignment success if it did receive a response. And if there was an error, then we just dispatch the fail. And now we need to go and add those action types in here. So something like this: create assignment start, fail, and success. And you can take those and bring them into these actions. So this will be create assignment start, create assignment success, and create assignment fail. And then the assignment here we need to post as the object that's being posted. And that's pretty much it. That's the whole method handled. So we can bring this here into the assignment create, and we'll say import create assignment from the store. And then that create assignment we will pass in over here, which takes in assignment, dispatch that method, which takes in that assignment, and then we will call here this.props.create assignment of this.props.token and the assignment. So like that. And so let's see if we've got any errors. So we're getting assignment in line 113. So we come here, and that's because we don't need to pass that into the create assignment success. Cool. So let's add a title test question 1. The answer will be yes, and the choice will be yes or no, and we'll just say submit. And of course we get a 500 internal server error because we just aren't handling the creation of these assignments the way that we need to be doing that. So we can go and close the assignments there, and question form. And actually we didn't actually do the reducers yet, so let's go inside here. So we'll basically just copy all of this stuff here, the assignment detail start and all the way up to the success, and we'll just copy and paste that there. And this will be the create assignment start, this will be create assignment success, and then create assignment fail. And then here we'll add in 3 more cases, where this one will be create assignment start, and we'll say create assignment start, and this will be create assignment success, which will be create assignment success, and the fail one. And let's just go handle what happens there. It's pretty much going to be the same thing, except we don't get any assignment action there, and pretty much that's it there. So we can close the reducer, and we'll go into our backend now. So let's go to API, and we're going to need to go to our views. Here we have the assignment view set, and so basically you can actually override the methods on a view set, and you can check that in the documentation of the Django REST framework. So for example, if you wanted to override the create method, you could just say define create, which takes in self and a request. And the basic logic that proceeds when the create method is executed is that it uses the serializer, so the assignment serializer in this case, which is in serializers.py. So it would take this serializer, and we would pass in the request data into the serializer. Then we would say if the serializer is valid, then using the serializer create an assignment, because that's what the serializer basically does, converts the JSON into an object, and then return a response, which is either an HTTP 201, that means it's created, or return an HTTP 400, which means it's a bad request. So basically we'll say that the serializer equals to the assignment serializer, this one here, and we say that the data equals to the request.data, which is coming here inside the create method. And then we just say if the serializer.is valid, then proceed. Otherwise you can just call it like this. You have to do that, otherwise it won't let you move on. And then we'll just say that the assignment object equals to serializer.create the request. Remember, this will only happen if it's valid, and we can actually just do that if serializer is valid. And we'll say if there is an assignment, then we will return a response, and the response we can import from the REST framework. So we just say from REST framework dot response import response, And then we'll import some statuses as well. We'll say from REST framework dot status import, and we're going to need the 201, which is created, and we're going to need the 400 bad request, and then we'll just grab that there and say return a response where the status equals to HTTP 201 created, otherwise return a response where the status equals to the HTTP 400 bad request. And we can put that like that. Cool. So this assignment serializer.create, this is a method on the serializer. So if you come here to the serializer, we can actually define that create method, and that's going to be quite handy because the data that we're getting in the serializer is really just not going to match what the serializer is expecting. So we're going to override the create method on the serializer to pass all that data into exactly how we need it to be passed, and then create the objects that need to be created. So for example, the choices, and then assign the choices to the questions, assign the questions to the assignment, and return the assignment. Basically, that's what we're doing. And so it is quite a long method. So we'll say define create, and it's going to take in self and request. And remember, this request is what's being passed in here, this request there. So we get access to the request.data. So we'll say request.data equals to that data, and we can actually print it out as well. So let's test it out. We'll add a title. We'll say question 1, answer is yes, choice yes and no. Click submit, and let's see inside the terminal. And here you get the teacher is Matt, title is title, questions is a list of objects where we've got title is question 1, choices is yes or no, and the answer is yes. Cool. So with this data, we basically just need to think about what we need to create in terms of models. So far we've got the assignment, the question, and we need the choice as well. And so we'll start by creating the assignment. So we'll say the assignment equals to an assignment object like that. And we're going to need to assign the teacher and the title to the assignment. So we'll say the teacher equals to user.objects.get, where the username equals to data of teacher. Remember, teacher is Matt in this case. So we're getting the user object that corresponds to that username, and we're going to need user imported. So we'll say from user.models import user, and if we come back down here, then we can say that the assignment teacher equals to teacher. We'll say the assignment title equals to data of title, and then we say assignment dot save. Cool. So that is the assignment being created. Now we need to create the questions, and the way that we're going to do that is just by looping through this list of questions and accessing these properties inside that dictionary. So we'll say for question q in data of questions, and that's going to return a list. Then we'll say that the new question equals to a question object, because remember we have to create a new object every time we loop through this. And we'll say that the new question title, or rather the question actually, because that's what it is on the model, equals to q of title. So that's the actual question that's being asked. And then we'll say that the order equals to some kind of integer, which we'll loop through over here. We'll say order equals 1 for the first one, and we'll say that equals to order. And then we can say new question.save, and we'll increment the order at the end of the for loop. So there's the new question. Now we need to assign the choices to that question. So we'll say for choice in question of choices, we'll say the new choice equals to a choice object, and that new choice title will be equal to C, which is what we're looping through. And then we can just save the choice and then add the choice to the new question's choices. So we'll say dot choices dot add the new choice like that. And then we just need to add the answer to the question as well. So we'll say new question dot answer equals to the choice object that we created. We don't want to create another choice object. We can basically just fetch the one that was already created. So we'll say choice.objects.get, where the title equals to q of answer. And then we can assign the assignment of this question equal to the assignment that was created at the beginning of this create method. So this assignment here. And then we can save our question. And then tally our order by saying order plus equals to 1. And at the end of all that, we can say return the assignment. So there we go. That's our create method. And if we come back and click submit, it seems we've got an error connection refused. So let's see why that is. We see we've got from user.model. So this is meant to be from users. And let's try that again. Click submit. And this time we get a 401 unauthorized. And that's because we're not logged in. So we'll just log in, and we actually might just need to refresh the page here. So we'll log in again, and let's click on create. We'll add a question there. Let's check that it wasn't created here. And okay, so it wasn't, so that's good. So this will be the first real assignment. And we'll say this is this cool? Say the answer is yes. Choices are yes and no. And we'll add another question here and say, does this work? The answer is yes. Choices are yes and no. Submit. And we get a 500 error again. Let's see. And it's telling us that there's a not null constraint, which is the answer ID. So let's go back here, back down. This is most likely happening because by default, the serializer is expecting us to pass in an ID. So let's just try and go to the models here. And what I'm going to do here is say blank and null equal true. And let's just stop the server here. And we'll just say make migrations. And then say migrate. And let's just run the server here. And if we come back and submit this, we're getting the same issue on the API question assignment ID. So again, let's just add the blank and null equal true to that. And this is obviously a temporary fix. This is not something that actually makes sense. So let's try it again now. We'll submit it, another 500. And now we're just getting get return more than one choice. So that means that it was actually created. So let's go back into here and let's refresh this. Okay, so we've got the first three real assignments is created 3 times. So let's just delete those there. And let's see what we need to get rid of. Let's just get rid of all those yes or no's and do that. And then we can go to the questions. We've got does this work? And question 2. Okay. So now let's click submit. And okay, we're returning 2 again. So let's delete everything. Okay, cool. Now let's try it again. We'll click submit. And okay, I understand why this is happening now. It's because we're passing in the choices as yes and no for both of these questions. So what's happening in the serializer is that it's creating those without even checking if they are actually existing. So another way to do this would just be to use the get or create method. But what I'm going to do is just, for the time being, we will just delete those and change the answers that we're submitting. So we can come back here into this and we'll say, does this work? Answer, let's just make it true. And we'll say choices are true and false. And if we click submit, now we didn't get any errors there. And there we go. Post request return 201. And if we go back to the home view, there's the first real assignment. And okay, so we've got this navigation error. Let's go fix that. And we can navigate into source. And then the assignment list, we can just close that there. And this is not meant to go there. This should rather go to the ID there. So we'll just change this to be item.id. And that should work. So let's go back home here. And if I click on that one, it takes me to number 7. Cool. There we go. So we've implemented the create form pretty much correctly. There's 1 or 2 problems that exist, and I'm sure those can be fixed, but I'm not really too worried about exactly how functional that is. We can always tweak that later. And the bottom line is that we were able to get this form to work. So now you can create these assignments here on the front end and see them in this list display, meaning that they are created in the back end. And so that's where we'll end this video. If you enjoyed it, make sure to leave a comment down below and let us know what you thought. And otherwise, thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.